Welcome to our last talk about Life of Pi, the last Magic Realism talk. So, here we go. Life of Pi, Magic Realism 3. So, we've talked about authorial reticence a few times. It just means it's hard to take the main character or the main voice or whatever of the story as if they're honest. So we have to kind of be a little bit skeptical, or we become a bit skeptical. So the lack of clear opinions about the accuracy of events and the credibility of the worldviews expressed by the characters in the text. So we can't really be sure that we're getting the full truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth when we read magic realist books. And that's something that we see in other media as well. So I think about some of my favorite movies from the 95 to 2010. We kind of can't trust the narrator. So in things like Shutter Island and Fight Club, The Usual Suspects, Memento, and Unbreakable, there's 5 movies, all real fun movies, that a little bit disturbing in each in its own way. But in each of these movies, we get a twist or a reveal that kind of completely changes our view about the film and our opinion about the film. It's almost as if, you watch it the first time through, just like with open eyes, fresh and credulous eyes, and then when you get that twist, you could watch it again, and with more sort of awoken skepticism and understanding the film in a deeper and more profound way. So in each of those movies, and I won't give them away, in each of those movies there's a twist or some kind of change at the end where it rejigs your entire understanding of the film. So in magic realist texts, we see this too. The narrator does not provide explanations about the credibility of events described in the text. Further, the narrator is indifferent. The story proceeds with logical precision as if nothing extraordinary took place. So, not necessarily a twist like in those films, but we kind of can't trust the narrators of these stories as well. So, in the magic realist text, Beloved, we can't really trust exactly what's going on. The ghost of a beloved child returns in the flesh, and in The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde, a young Dominican American man, he grapples with loneliness and an ancient curse upon his family. And in both cases, what should we believe? We're not really, the authors aren't telling us. So Martel, the narrator, not the writer but the narrator, he's amazed and skeptical of Mama G's claim. So he meets Mama G, Francis Adirubasami, the elderly man in the cafe when he's in Pondicherry. And the elderly man said, "I have a story that will make you believe in God." I stopped waving my hand, but I was suspicious. Was this a Jehovah's Witness knocking at my door? Does your story take place 2,000 years ago in a remote corner of the Roman Empire? I asked. And then it's 12, Roman numeral 12. So from the very beginning, there is I guess you might say, there's kind of this sort of cute skepticism about Pi's story from Yann Martel. He says, are you trying to evangelize me right now? Are you trying to convert me to your religion? Is what he's thinking, and that's not really the case at all. We find out later. So can we trust Pi Part 2? So at the very end, when we meet the Japanese transport officials, he tells an entirely different, short, and brutal tale. It's almost in every respect, however, it's almost in every respect more believable than the larger story, the longer story with Richard Parker, right? So he tells this short, brutal tale about the murder of his mother and what he resorts to survive, including cannibalism. But he has one more final question for the Japanese transport officials. He says, "You're welcome, but before you go, I'd like to ask you something." "Yes?" "The Simsum sank on July 2nd, 1977. "Yes." "And I arrived on the coast of Mexico, the sole human survivor. the sole human survivor of the Simpsons on February 14th, 1978. That's right. I told you two stories that account for the 227 days in between. Yes, you did. And neither explains the sinking of the Simpsons. That's right. Neither makes a factual difference to you. That's true. You can't prove which story is true and which is not. You must take my word for it. I guess so. In both stories, the ship sinks, my entire family dies, and I suffer. Yes, that's true. So tell me, since it makes no factual difference to you, and you can't prove the question either way, which story do you prefer? Which is the better story? The story with animals, or the story without animals? Mr. Okamoto. That's an interesting question. Mr. Chiba. The story with animals. Mr. Okamoto. Yes, the story with animals is the better story. Pai Patel. Thank you. And so it goes with God. Silence. What did he just say? Mr. Okamoto. I don't know. Oh. Mr. Chiba. Oh, look, he's crying. Long silence. Mr. Okamoto. We'll be careful when we drive away. We don't want to run into Richard Parker. Pai Patel. Don't worry, you won't. He's hiding somewhere. You'll never find him. So there's kind of a double meaning in Pai's words at the end. He asks them which story they prefer. They say they prefer the story with animals. And then they kind of, I don't know if they're trying to mollify or placate him by saying, we'll watch out for Richard Parker, if they really believe that Richard Parker is in the jungle or not. However, Pai says, you won't find him. He's hidden. And the double meaning of that could mean that the brutish and bestial aspects of Pai's personality, his pure animalistic survival instinct is Richard Parker. It is the instinct that would cause him to kill the Frenchman and cannibalize him. That aspect of Pai's personality is gone. Is as gone as Richard Parker would be in the Mexican jungle. That's what the double meaning of that it could be. I'm just saying, yeah. So the last question is: do we trust Yann Martel? Maybe a skeptical reading, or maybe a cynical reading of the text, and I don't really think that this is part, because I don't really detect cynicism or any kind of cynicism in the text. I don't detect cynicism in Pai. Pai is kind of arch and funny the way he feeds Yann Martel the spicy Indian food, and the double meaning of his comment to the Japanese officials, and just kind of like the way the tale unfolds, right? The way he tells the tale. Pai's might be kind of have a half of a smirk on the side of his face, but I never really detect cynicism. So I say this, it would be an extremely cynical reader who would probably think this or ask this question. Does Life of Pai reduce religion to a fairy tale that makes us feel nice, right? If both of the stories, and that's all they are, is stories, the stories of science and rationality, the story of faith, if they're just stories we tell ourselves, that there's no real meaning, it just makes us feel good to believe that there's God in an afterlife. That's a very cynical reading of Life of Pai, and I don't know that it brings any more meaning to it, but you could support that is a reading you could have. The other thing I think that many people touch on is, does Life of Pai elevate storytelling to an almost holy status? Is this something that is just essentially human? I mean, some people say that religion is part of something that is just ingrained in humanity. We have religion, we have these beliefs, these faith traditions and systems. Is storytelling just something that is so human, so that it is on the same level as our faith traditions? That's another question. The last one is Martel a bit too clever and cute in this novel. You know, he writes page after page about the sloth at the start, the three-toed sloth or the two-toed sloth or whatever, and he is yeah. Is it a little bit too slick and clever for you, his writing? I just leave that with you. Just 3 questions I leave with you to think about on your own. But just something that I always, every time I read this, every spring when I read this book again, questions that I kind of ask myself to reflect on a bit. All right. So just with that, I found this in an article about the film version of Life of Pi on Psychology Today, the website for the magazine. The stories we tell ourselves to endure. So this is a quote from that article. Clearly, Pi preferred the better story. A massive extrapolation of positive thought that leads him to make sense of things, that carries him to a new life with a loving wife and family. The other story, where humans are reduced to primal terror, could only lead to a brutally shattered life. In this story, you could see the entire story as an abandonment by God. But at the same time, it becomes evident that God was actually present at every moment, and in the end, he realizes that Richard Parker is actually his savior. So instead of a fairy tale, you know, a placating fairy tale we tell ourselves, Pi's story, the story is a kind of a wellspring for him to like base his life upon, that he is able to get past this trauma by this sort of faith that he has, and the faith in better stories, and so there's maybe the counter side to you know, Life of Pi reducing religion to fairy tales. Maybe more Life of Pi realizing that story and the stories that we tell ourselves, the ones that we use to endure the hardships and the brutality of the trauma, they can be, you know, so important to someone like Pi. So that's it for Life of Pi and Magic Realism, just talking about it. I hope those of you who read the book were able to. You can watch the film. It's a really well done film by Ang Lee. It's very beautifully directed. The graphics and the CGI that they use for the animals and whatnot, the tiger, were second to none. Really nice. And he has this this beautiful kind of crossfading between scenes where we're in Pi's kitchen, but the ocean kind of comes up behind him, and then it goes into the story. So he uses these really elaborate and beautiful transitions in the film that I personally found pretty gorgeous. Like just the look. Ang Lee always makes beautiful movies, and this is definitely one of them. So it's definitely worth a watch. And so I leave you with that, with sort of the last of Magic Realism. All right, you can hit me on email if you have any questions, and you can work on your how Life of Pi is a Magic Realist text essay outline. It's on the website, and there's a little video to show you what I'm looking for that second to last assignment. Take care, everybody.